Hello, friends and cinephiles. On today's Bits and Bites on Italian cinema and other stuff, I'd like to spend a few words on something that is not everyone's cup of tea. To be honest, it is not mine. Still, it is a genre that has a great following and merits being recognized as a unique form of cinematic art. The Giallo is a genre of murder mystery fiction and often contains slasher, thriller, psychological horror, psychological thriller, sexploitation, and, less frequently, supernatural horror elements. This particular style of Italian-produced murder mystery horror thriller film usually blends the atmosphere of suspense of thriller fiction with elements of horror fiction, such as slasher violence and eroticism, and often involves a mysterious killer whose identity is not revealed until the final act of the film. The genre developed in the mid to late 1960s, peaked in popularity during the 1970s. While there are many fantastic gialli directors like Mario Bava with his Blood and Black Lace from 1964 and Lucio Fulci with his Don't Torture a Duckling from 1972, the undisputed master of horror is Dario Argento, who, along with his many works such as his 1977 Suspiria and 1985 Phenomena, is arguably the director most synonymous with the Italian pulpy thriller horror films known as Giallo. This year in particular marks the 50th anniversary of Profondo Rosso, Deep Red. The film that brought us 5 decades of tension and mystery, terror and fear and anguish by the director Dario Argento. Special screenings are being shown in theaters around the world, everywhere, including screenings accompanied by live performances of the soundtrack. Yes, you heard right. In fact, the Roma Film Music Festival held in Rome this year a celebration for the 50th anniversary of the movie with 2 live concerts. You may not know that the soundtrack of Deep Red is one of the most famous in the history of cinema, and it is thanks to Goblin and Claudio Simonetti in particular that the film has acquired an iconic value also on a musical level. The group Goblin is an Italian progressive rock band known for their film scores. They have frequently collaborated with Dario Argento, even in his film Suspiria in 1977.
It's useless to try and explain it to you.
Scores made by Goblin and Argento's movies often have eerie and ominous tones that heighten the horror and suspense. Theirs is a unique sound which mixes rock, jazz, and psychedelic atmospheres in perfect harmony with Argento's visual narration. In July 2021, ICFF was joined by a special guest, Maurizio Guarini, former band member of Goblin, who in the spring of 1975, Goblin had invited Guarini to join the band, just after Deep Red was released. In 1976, Guarini joined in the recording of the score for Argento's movie Suspiria. So, what is it that brought Dario Argento to revolutionize the genre of the thriller movie? Well, what it was nothing certainly for the faint of heart. The elements that particularly made Deep Red a masterpiece in its field are many, and here are some of them. For instance, the images presented in this film do not always make logical sense, but instead, they tap into our unconscious emotions using Argento's distinctive visual language of bizarre and dreamlike sequences. The plot is straightforward enough. It's about a pianist who witnesses the murder of a famous psychic and teams up with a reporter to try and discover the identity of the killer while attempting to avoid the victim's same fate. But the feelings evoked are much more complicated and revolve around a mysterious painting which may serve as a clue to the killer's identity. The scenes with the painting act as a center point which the entire film revolves around, while also acting as a perfect example of how Argento's film gets under your skin. Early on in the film, our protagonist, played by David Hemmings, witnesses a murder in the window of a neighbor's apartment from the square below. He runs up to the apartment following a trail of blood through a corridor hung with strange paintings and finds the psychic Helga's body lodged in the window. It's incredible how the director achieves terror by tapping into our unconscious fears with a scream that cannot be heard until the glass of the window is shattered. We just see it, and then we finally hear it. The scream is so powerful and visceral that it shocks and unsettles us completely. Throughout his film, Profondo Rosso, there are haunting combinations of images that claw themselves deep into our subconscious. There are particularly memorable ones that use close-ups, including, a floating eye surrounded by blackness, the sweat on someone's temple, a woman splurging water from her mouth, a gloved hand gripping a fence, and strange childhood toys. The use of the color red is also another method with which the director makes us feel the trauma, and which is then used throughout the film to re-invoke that same feeling. Especially in his film Deep Red, Argento makes heavy use not only of close-ups, as I've just mentioned, but also fast zooms and changing perspectives, all of which means we see normal objects in strange ways, turning the familiar into the uncanny, manipulating our perceptions to keep us constantly on edge. Certainly, Argento has been a master at elevating horror into an art form, turning violence into beauty. The use of colors, the music, the atmospheres he has created and draws us into, they're like bad dreams. And dreams don't always make logical sense, but the powerful ones certainly leave an emotional mark. Deep Red messes with our perception so effectively because our perception of the world is affected by emotional states, and the film heightens our emotional states. Argento is always working to unsettle us, to make us feel at home, yet not at home. Deep Red is not just terrifying, it's uncanny. A little bit of background. Dario Argento came from a cinematic family, but one involved in traditional classic cinema. This was not for him. He was from an early age attracted and predisposed to mysteries and horror, and as a child was first inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's short stories, which he read voraciously. In these stories, he discovered strange, mysterious worlds. When first starting out as a young director, in fact, he even worked with Sergio Leone and Bernardo Bertolucci. Soon, however, he found himself drawn more and more to horror on the screen. He has recounted that this provided for him, quote, a cathartic outlet for exorcising nightmares and a safe way to explore the human psyche's darkest side, unquote. Like a painter or musician, his skills, and I said kills, not skills, are art pieces, visual metaphors. The problem is that in watching this art, we just can't look away nor shut our eyes. It's almost hypnotic. Dario Argento has terrified audiences worldwide with some of his most spectacular kills ever to be captured on film. And now, more than ever, there is an ever-growing audience for Argento's brand of Gothic storytelling and stylized horror. Profondo Rosso, Deep Red, is turning 50 this year, and even now, we still simply cannot look away.